Hello, friends, and welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. My name is Scott Cowan, and I'm the host of the show. Each episode, I have a conversation with an interesting guest who is living in or from Washington State. These are casual conversations with real and interesting people. I think you're going to like the show. So let's jump right in with today's guest. Tami, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
I don't know.
Really appreciate you
I don't
having me.
know why you answered your phone. You're probably regretting it. No, thanks for thanks for coming back on the show. And last year we had you on and we were talking about fall hikes. It's fall again, but our big focus today is going to be on the second edition of your book called the Hiking the Wonderland Trail. And
yeah.
And I mean, as you know, I love to hike. Ha ha. So I'm teasing you when I say this, but did something change on the trail that we have a new book? I mean, no, I'm kidding. But I've always been curious about the Wonderland Trail. I don't know a lot about it, so I'm going to tell you what I know.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna probably tell me I'm wrong, and then I'm going to count on you to tell me the right stuff. The Wonderland Trail is this trail that goes around the base of Mount Rainier. It's very easy.
Nope.
So I'm already wrong. No, I know it goes around the base. I know it goes around the base of Mount Rainier. I also understand that it's a pretty a challenging thing, but I don't know a lot of the particulars. So I got one first question for you. How long is the entire trail?
Well, that's a bit debatable, but we'll say for the sake of argument, it's 93 miles. But depends, how you do it. The actual trail itself, if you were to go around, is like 92.8 or something like that. It's but it's, we'll say for the sake of argument, 93 miles.
All right. So 93 miles. Do you know, has anyone ever tried to accomplish this fast?
Oh my gosh, yes. There's what's called the FKT. Oh, got my
FKT.
Yeah, I got my letters all backwards there for a sec. Fastest known time, and that's true on all these big trails. Everybody does the fastest known time. We're accomplishing a lot of really cool things as human beings in this world we live in lately. But the fastest known time on the Wonderland keeps changing, and it's pretty crazy how I mean, people run it a lot. It's a very common trail run. And so there's that, but, there's people that do it in 14 days, people that do it in 22 hours. You've got the gamut of different people who are doing it. And the sort of the cliche saying is hike your own hike, right? Do you. Right. So,
but it's funny, humans we're just so competitive. It's like, well, if you did it in 14 hours, I'm going to beat that and do it in 13:30 or whatever.
Right.
So how many times have you hiked the Wonderland Trail?
Over a dozen. And I say over a dozen because I've done it in parts and pieces more than that, but 12 times around the entirety in one consecutive trip.
Okay. So of those 12 times, if I asked you to say, give me the average, how long do you take on the trail?
I would say a week. Okay. I've done it in as little as 6 days, but a week is a comfortable pace for me. And, people that go in an average, I would say the average backpacker that is kind of getting into it or hasn't had a lot of experience, this is a tough trail. It's 22,000 feet of elevation gain and loss, and it's shaped kind of like a giant pie crust. So if you imagine you're either going down or coming up the entire time, you're climbing or you're descending, and that's pretty hard on the joints and the body and the huffing and puffing.
Right.
And and it's a beautiful trail. So if you get a chance to explore it on foot, the part of actually being on trail is much more beautiful than hustling to camps. Most of the camps are in the forest or the trees or the woods, or they're down in river valleys, things like that, which are still beautiful. But you're not getting up into those real big lofty areas as much when you're in the camps. So I like to encourage people to take your time on the trail. one of the really cool things about the way that the Wonderland is structured with the park system, it's both a curse and a blessing, is that you have to have a permit. So you have designated camps to go to at the end of the day that are assigned to you. And so you pretty much have a guarantee that you're going to have a spot to camp. So you don't have to hustle and rush to try to get to camp. Now, a lot of people do that because they want the best campsite and they want the best option. But a flat spot is a flat spot when you're tired. You're going to sleep all the same no matter where your dirt is.
Right.
So I like to encourage people to enjoy it as much as they possibly can when they're on the trail.
How much, if anything, do you know about the history of the trail?
I know a fair amount about the history. Yeah.
So when do you think the trail kind of was established as we know it today, the Wonderland Trail?
Well, in 1915, it was, let's see, there were 3 crews of 15 men who worked for 3 months to complete it. And the original purpose of the trail is really kind of cool. The original purpose was this Mount Rainier became a park in 1899. Before that, you kind of imagine what life was like, right? And so these people were hunting a lot for food. That was their source of sustenance. And so all of a sudden you have regulations around where you can and cannot hunt. So there were lots of poachers, lots of people who are pretty angry about the fact that hunting in the national park was, at that time, they were a little fickle on the rules, but they were trying to get a grip on the poaching situation. So a lot of the use for it was for rangers to patrol for vandals, for wildfires, for poachers, that kind of thing. And in fact, backing up even more, this is kind of fun. So in the early 1900s, there were all these concessions coming into the park. So you imagine now you have this beautiful playground and this wonderland of just amazing things, right, in the backcountry. And you had the clash between horses and automobiles. You had a lot of people wanting to see this magical place, and they were trying to figure out how to make money, as any good business does. So they were talking about putting golf courses and hotels in this area and all of that. And they had what was called the Camp in the Clouds at Paradise, which is where you could pay a couple bucks to go camp in the quote unquote clouds, which was a big canvas tent. And the pictures from that time are really cool. It's just, the women in the really long skirts with the big hats and the fluffy blouses and stuff. And that's what they were going up there in. And Hiram Chittenden, who you may know, was with the Army Corps of Engineers. You may have heard of the Ballard Locks. Right. He was responsible for that too. His vision at that time, so they put the road into Paradise, was to build this 100-mile road that would touch the toes of the glaciers and circle the mountain. So he was like, we have this amazing road that goes to Paradise. Let's put in this really cool road that goes all the way around the mountain. So they kind of started doing part of that. And then that was met with environmental frowning also, even way back then, kind of, for one, because the structure, just with the glaciers and the amount of debris and things that come down into the river valleys, was going to be hard to maintain that road. But also they kind of saw that this is such a special area. Let's see what we can do to preserve it. So the original route was much longer that he proposed. It was about 130 to 140 miles compared to 93. But much of the Wonderland Trail was actually, it follows the original survey lines of Hiram's road, his vision. But today we have one of the most amazing trails in this country right in our backyard, which is really neat.
What's the story of the name? How did we get the name, the Wonderland Trail?
That's a good question. I believe it is a trail of wonders. I mean, it's so beautiful. John Muir went and climbed Mount Rainier, and he set foot at the base of it and did some of this backcountry travel. And his comment was, the mountain is best observed from the bottom. So, people that went and saw it, the Mountaineers Club was also very responsible for sort of making it the Wonderland Trail. They were the first people to make the trek. It was a group of hikers, and they repeated all these different outings and finally kind of helped craft the route. But of course, back then they were using horses, and it was a lot more sustainable because there were so many fewer people on the trail than we have now. But I think the Park Service didn't quite realize with this trail that they had made for, mostly for patrols, and then later on for the mountaineers and for recreation, that they had just created this gem of outdoor recreation that has just since skyrocketed in interest and just, I mean, it's like I say, it's one of the top 10 trails in the country. It's just spectacular.
What was the motivation for you to hike it for the first time?
Well, I have this sort of, Mount Rainier is near and dear to my heart. I have pictures of my grandfather in the park when he was, fairly young. There's a picture of my mom sitting up at sunrise. My family, I'm a third generation Washingtonian. They've spent a lot of time in the park. And so I guess part of me feels very connected in that way, historically, with my lineage. And then just being there, so many wonderful things in my life have happened in that park. My husband proposed to me in the park. I was in the park, and this is a really cool story. My sister was in labor with my first nephew, and as I was leaving the park, this little tiny bear cub ran across the road, and I went, he's here, because I had no cell service. I had no way of knowing. And then later found out that he was born right about that time, which is really, really neat. But so there's a lot of things like that I've felt connected to the park, but I've always loved hiking. I've always been a hiker. As far back as I can remember in my childhood, we've been hiking as a family. And then, just hiking the Wonderland was just a natural fit. It was just, it was there. It was there, and it was beautiful, and it needed to be hiked.
Okay.
Yep.
You've written, how many books have you published at this point?
I have 5.
When you decided that you wanted to write a book on the Wonderland Trail, how was that received by your publisher?
Awesome. It was my first book, actually, which is really funny. The way it was born was sort of out of necessity. At the time, I was working for REI. I was doing some project management things, some stewardship stuff. I was teaching classes on outdoor recreation, backpacking, fall hiking, winter hiking, things like that. And I taught an entire class dedicated to the Wonderland Trail. And what I found was that every time I taught that class, more and more people were showing up for it. And we would run out of chairs, and people would be from the sales floor would be grabbing like camp chairs for people to sit on and thermarests and stuff. And they were pouring out of the event space. And every time it got bigger, and my handout was getting thicker and thicker. And I was like, I need to write a book. There really at that time was only one book that had been written on it, and it was quite old and hadn't been updated. And I was like, this needs to happen. So that's kind of how it started. And so I wrote the book, and the rest is history. And it was published in 2012. That was the first publishing. And so the second edition now is coming out 12 years later, and it's pretty cool. It's been fun to watch it sort of grow and turn and morph. And I never expected this sort of outpouring of camaraderie over this book. It's been really neat to meet the readers and the people who have had, quite frankly, their lives touched in some really amazing way by doing this trail. And they nicknamed it the Wonderland Trail Bible, which is completely honorable and to have that title. But yeah, it's been really a joy to have this book.
When you decided, when you, like you said, your classes are overflowing, your handouts are becoming, a mini, a short story size, if you will, a lot of paper. Had you had any professional writing experience before?
Oh yeah. Okay. I mean, I have a marketing background, and so I had been doing a lot of that kind of case studies and things like that. So, and then at REI, I was working on a lot of the program stuff and calendaring and things like that. So
you had.
So I had quite a bit of writing background.
All right.
Yes.
So it wasn't a complete shock to you, the amount of work that it takes to write a book, and the
Well, I
right.
learned.
But okay.
Yeah.
And there was no edits. You gave it to your editor, and they said this is perfect, and they didn't make any recommendations, no changes.
Yeah. And they were like, wow, how are you so
Yeah,
perfect?
right.
And that was that.
No, it's always
Oh, they right now, if they're listening to this, they're cracking
that's
up. I
okay. I mean,
guarantee it.
the thing is that I think a common thread that I've experienced, especially with outdoor writers, is many of them kind of have the same sort of thing. There's like whatever they're writing about, like there needs to be a book on this. We need to document this, blah, blah, blah. And they're not necessarily, professional writers when they get the idea. And I think they underestimate the amount of effort that it takes and the teamwork that it takes to put a book together and get it published and get it on the shelves and get it sold, and much less a second edition. That's awesome. So I want to ask you, I love asking hard questions, like, and negative hard questions. So not negative, but what went wrong when you wrote the book? Like what
went
did you
wrong?
underestimate? Like, was there something you thought, oh, I can talk about, this, that, and the other thing, and it'll be easy, and and you just missed the mark? Was there anything?
I think if I'm being completely vulnerable and honest with you, I think for me the hardest part of writing was the criticism on every level, because people, especially in the social media era and things like that, they tend to feel like they have a lot of opinions about things, and it's very hard to write a guidebook that isn't dry data, because there are plenty of those out there. If you want a book that tells you how far to point A to point B without any commentary, they're dime a dozen.
Right.
I didn't want to write that book. I wanted a book for dreamers. I wanted a book for people who don't hike as much as for people that do. I wanted people to read this book cover to cover and be able to look at the planning aspects and do that, as well as dream, as well as have it be a comprehensive guide. And that is a really hard thing to achieve, because you're either going to have a super heavy data rich book, which is facts and figures, or you're going to have a book that is, I tend to think of those books as kind of dry. They're helpful for sure, because data is great. But if you're going to sit down and read a book, a coffee table book, you want to open it up and start reading from the beginning and sort of get hooked and start that planning, dreaming phase. Because let's face it, behind every single adventure, the honeymoon phase of the planning is one of the best parts of the entire thing. Whether you actually get going on the trail, having that excitement around doing it and planning your gear and who's going with you in these moments and what happens when we get to this bridge and and so that, all crafting that in your mind, is really a key piece of this book. And it's I'm really proud of the fact that I wrote that with that in mind, with the dreamer in mind, because I guess, we can only see things from our own lens, Steve. Like, we can only see what we, how we think. And for me, that's how I think. I want a book that is fun to read, that is interesting, and that also has everything I need in it to plan a successful adventure. So I thought that's what I would want. So that's what I will write.
Well, and obviously, if it's been, subtitled the Bible of it, and if it's in its second edition, there's enough people out there that have gotten value and great value out of this to justify and warrant another version. I wish I would have looked at Appendix A before I asked you this question, because I'm just curious. Did you ever have you ever encountered the Beast of Ultimate Challenge and looked deep into his pitiless eyes? I'm like, oh my god, I love it.
I have actually met that beast many times in my life,
and I'm looking at this.
It's a formidable opponent.
And here's just, this is dry data, in the sense it's like, I'm just going to arbitrarily, I'm looking clockwise, and let's say the 12-day itinerary. You've got 7 to 13 days. So you got a week to, let's say, 2 weeks. And let's just say I'm going to try to accomplish this in 12 days. Longmire to Devil's Dream, 5.5 miles. That doesn't sound like a lot of work. I mean, five and a half miles in a day seems like
Yeah.
a bite-sized chunk. Okay. Now, I'm just looking at the appendix. I'm not looking at any other data. I'm not looking at the elevation gain. I'm not looking that I have to do anything else other than just walk 5.5 miles that day. The next day is Devil's Dream to the South Puyallup River, 6.5. South Puyallup River to, I'm never going to pronounce that, Clapshy Park?
Clapatchie
Okay,
Park.
4.7 miles. You get the idea. The biggest day here is Sunrise Camp to Summerland. It's 10.3 miles. So to me, that's a lot of walking in a day.
And you're looking at a 13-day itinerary, which is a little bit longer than most people would take. But yeah, so one of the things to think about is that there's been people that have hiked this trail with babies, infants. I mean, it's crazy the variation of people. So like I said, you have people that run it in 17 hours, 22
That's
hours.
Crazy.
And then you have people, I met this beautiful couple that took their tiny little tot on a 14-day adventure on this trail. So you just have so many different abilities. Right. And you have 90-year-olds that go hike this trail that are still in great shape, that go rock it out, but they're not going to do much more than 6 to 10 is going to be the upper limit.
Day, yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to provide itineraries for people, both clockwise and counterclockwise. There was nothing like this available when I wrote this book. You literally had to sit down at a map and physically start calculating distances to figure out camp to camp distances. Okay. And so I thought, let's make the planning easy for people. Let's make distances and days. So if you want to do it in 7, here's a great way to do it in 7, with kind of manageable chunks day after day based on the amount of time you had to spend on the trail. Okay. So that was my hope. And and so that's kind of an easy planning tool to have that at your disposal.
So in your opinion, for you personally, okay, like two-part question. What is for you, once again, I'm asking you your opinion, as at the time that we record this, it could change tomorrow. Okay. What do you think is the optimal number of days? And is there a season of the year you think is the optimal time to do it?
Well, I mean, I like going fast. So if I can do it in 6 days, for me, that's ideal. And that's simply because I've done this trail so much. I know it so well. I know, even 5 to 6 days, 6 is more comfortable. But if you can do it a little shorter, you don't have to do as much food caching and food. You don't have to carry as much with you. And so that makes it a little bit easier. And so, yeah, I would say for me, what's comfortable is about 6 days on this trail. But I am, I've done a fair amount of hiking, so my body is quite adjusted to carrying weight and the uphills and downhills. And these are legit uphills and downhills. Your knees are going to hurt you. Your back is going to hurt. The body's going to start creaking and croaking if you haven't done a lot of hiking. Even if you're young and in shape, it can throw one down on you. Okay. So, and you can talk to any park ranger and they'll tell you the challenges they've seen with people on this trail and the help that they've had to provide for folks that get in a little over their head, because you have to select your camps. And that's another hard part, is you have to be really honest with yourself about how far you can go. Because if the camp you want is further than you think you can go, but you tell yourself it'll be fine, I'll just pick this camp. It's dark, your body hurts, your knee isn't cooperating, something's going on, and you get to a camp before that, you don't have a permit to stay there. So it can be really challenging and you have to keep walking. And that's where people get into some trouble with the backcountry permit situation. Okay. And I always tell people, apply the golden rule if that happens. If there truly is an injury, some reason why a person can't get to their camp, there's not going to be a camp spot for them, most likely, because most of those camps are filled every night. This is a very popular trail, and you have an assigned camp. Now, your site number is not assigned, just the location, but most of them are full. And so if you wander in a camp with a bum knee and you're at the wrong camp, where are you going to stay? So if you kindly ask someone, if you have a situation, if you can share a camp with them, or if they know of any places that are open that you could plop your tent down, that are,
Okay.
sustainable. And in some cases, there's some open areas like where you could do that, but most people are really kind and they'll let you stay or move their tent to give you some room for that. And I've seen that happen on this trail.
Okay. So now the follow up to that was what season for you?
For me, I love September timeframe. The kids are back in school. There's a little less hustle and bustle going on in the
Mm-hmm.
park. And there's not as many people out there in the backcountry, but I will say that has changed this year with the timed entry program down at Mount Rainier. So the hustle and bustle is a little less with the timed entry than it has been previously. So, but I love September. I like the cooler temps. The bugs are gone. You have your berries that are, early September, the berries are ripe and ready to go.
Okay.
You don't necessarily have the wildflowers. That's earlier in the season. But your views on a sunny day, boy, and a nice crisp fall day is beautiful.
Okay. How, if you could, so the listeners out there and they're thinking, I like the idea of my back hurting me and my knee giving me fits and I've overextended myself. And she's talked about bugs. Well, this all sounds lovely, but you've mentioned a backcountry permit. What's the process? Is it a lottery system? How does one go about getting, and how far in advance is somebody organizing this?
Well, that's a great question. It used to be, back when I wrote this book, that you had a physical form that you printed out online. You printed it on your computer. You filled it out with your handwriting.
Okay.
Then you went to a fax machine because most people didn't have a fax in their office. They had to go to like what was it, like Mailbox Plus or something
Yeah,
to find a
Kinko's
fax
or Mailbox
machine.
Plus.
Yeah,
Oh my
Kinko's.
gosh. Okay.
Yeah. And then you'd ask them to fax it. But the problem was there were so many people the day that those opened trying to fax that you would sit there playing finger yoga because the fax machine would be like, and you'd have to keep going and going. I would spend hours sitting there trying to get that fax to go through. So I'm happy to report no longer is that the case. Now, and so now it's pretty cool. They have this advanced lottery system. So it opens in February and the date can be a little bit flexible with that. And then you can, for $6, you can apply to get into the advanced lottery.
Okay.
So the advanced lottery doesn't necessarily mean if you win that you're going to get a full Wonderland loop, because what the advanced lottery buys you if you do win is an opportunity to apply for a full loop. But it gives you a time frame when you can go in and log in and apply for that full loop. So you may be kind of at the end of that time frame and all the other people have taken the spots you wanted or those dates. So it's a challenging trail to get permits for. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This one's tough, but it's always worth trying. It's $6 non-refundable. If you do get your spot, it's great. Otherwise, you'll get a letter that will say, sorry, you didn't win. 30% of the camps are reserved for first come, first serve. So if you don't get a reservation in advance, you can walk in the day of or the day before and see what's available and see if there's a possibility of getting a full loop. Now, you can't be picky about your camps or your starting locations. And you have to kind of have that carved out of your schedule, a week or however long open. And so, and another trick there is if you use, so recreation.gov is a website that they're using. You can go into rec.gov a week or even, days before your trip and see if there's any camps along the Wonderland that have opened up. And occasionally, if you hit that on a regular basis, you can sometimes book 2 or 3 camps in advance. Now, that's not a whole itinerary. And of course, 2 or 3 camps are probably not going to allow you optimal starting locations, and you may end up with a 23-mile day and a 5-mile day. So, but what you can do with that reservation is at least you have some camps that would probably work for you. And I'll give you an example. Ipsit Creek in the upper northwestern part of the park is a place where you could leave your car and walk into a backcountry camp. So if that's available on the first day you want to come and do the Wonderland Trail, you could log on to rec.gov, pick up an Ipsit campsite, and maybe there's another one in your itinerary that happens to be the next day. Okay, well, now you have 2 Wonderland Trail camps that you've already reserved. Then you could go into the ranger station the day before, and your odds are substantially higher by 2 camps as opposed to going in empty-handed, if that makes any kind of sense, to try to get your walk-up permit. So utilizing kind of both systems is not a bad plan either.
So what if somebody doesn't bother to get a permit? What if they just start hiking and they show up at a camp? I mean, how are we enforcing this? Are the rangers at these camps actively? I mean, in your opinion, what's happening?
Yeah, they have active backcountry patrols and they check permits. So, for example, when I did it last summer, my permit was checked twice, and they're looking, and people rarely are rule breakers. It's interesting in the park. They kind of know the hiker community is awesome. People tend to be really good about, do unto others kind of thing. And so you know that the backcountry space is limited. So if you show up, you have run the chance of someone playing their own, putting on their ranger hat and walking around going, can I see your permit? I don't have a place to camp and I'm supposed to be here this night, and trying to figure out who's in the wrong. And that has happened too, and so, but oftentimes, like I say, it's not always people trying to be malicious and do something without breaking rules. It can be a simple misunderstanding with their permit. It could be that they got into some sort of trouble physically, or it could be that they accidentally made a mistake on their permit and booked 2 nights at the same place and they thought they were supposed to move on. So it's all of these things combined that make this permit system a little challenging. But I will tell you, once you get it dialed and you get out there, it's so beautiful just to get to your camp and have a little spot to camp. And really these problems are becoming less and less with the new system. And then you have the timed entry on top of it. So it's like all these regulations, and people are kind of starting to understand there's a process here that we have to follow.
Okay. Are you aware of how many people the trail's capacity is set at this time?
That's kind of a hard question because you have a lot of different campsite options. You could there are campsites that are off the Wonderland Trail, like Olali Creek Campground, for example. That one is, oh gosh, what is it? I think it's 4 or 5 miles, maybe less, off the Wonderland. So if you're in a place where there's no camping on the Wonderland, the park rangers may say, what about Olali? Or you look at the map and you go, I could stay there that night instead of staying on the Wonderland, right? So how many people are on it all at once is a very difficult question. Plus you have trail runners that are doing it from point to point that are pretty much day hiking, because they're not using the backcountry camps. You have section hikers, you have fast packers, you have day hikers that are going up to Summerland and enjoying the day up there. So how many people are kind of on it is kind of hard to say. One thing is you probably won't have a ton of solitude if you're someone who wants to go way out in the backcountry. National parks in general obviously are popular. So you will see people, which to some people they find comforting, knowing that there's others out there.
I mean, so I'm not a hiker, but if I was a novice hiker, it would be a dual-edged thing for me. Running into people all the time would get to be a little like, but on the other hand, if I were to get mixed up, maybe I roll my ankle, something like that, it would be comforting to know that if I'm sitting here on this log because I turned my ankle or hurt my knee, that somebody may be walking by before too long. There's I can see both sides for me. Okay. Well, we could talk about the trail for hours and hours. And I think what I would prefer for this conversation is give the audience a overview of the book. Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
let's give the audience,
Yeah.
let's tease the audience. We're not going to tell them what's out there, but let's give them an overview of how you put the book together.
All right. So at the beginning, we were talking about planning. So all the things we just talked about in permits in a little more detail.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about some of the history of the Wonderland, some of the areas that get washed out a lot, some of the challenges, things to look out for while you're out there, behaviors in wildlife country, different areas. In fact, in this new edition, this is kind of cool. I was so excited about adding some new things. And one of the really neat little things that I added was there's this little bear icon that shows up, the little wildlife icon, and it shows up in places where there are, you are most likely to see wildlife, and it can be wildlife, not necessarily bears, just wildlife in general. It might be marmots, they like to hang out here, or mountain goats like to hang out in this area, and it's a little bear paw. So that's kind of a fun one. I go into detail about all those things. And then another cool thing is I've added blue ribbon areas. So this is kind of like rising to the top of the pile of the Wonderland in each section, what is a sort of the highlight and the don't miss these areas kind of section. Okay. Then I also added on this new edition a stay a day, which is kind of cool. So there are a ton of really great opportunities to park yourself at a camp and sort of base camp, and then go day hike off the Wonderland and then come back to your camp. And there's a lot of people that miss that fly in from all over the world, or, in the United States, and they don't get to see those really cool, like, lookout towers, or maybe there's a really neat feature that they want to go check out, old park cabins or things. And so I added the stay a day so they could plan that into their itinerary. Very cool. And then just some fun things, there's really, really great maps and pictures. All the pictures are updated and, new for how things change. And I added a fun section called Word Salad because, as you found with Clopachy Park, there are a lot of really fun Native American type names in this book that are challenging to pronounce. And you can tell who's local by the way they pronounce Puyallup, right? And so you hear that all different ways.
Squim is another one.
Squim. Yeah, Squim. Siaquam. Yeah. And so I added that to kind of help people, like, be locals in that. And then and then I added some other hikes, like there's, of course, the East Side Loop and the Northern Loop, which are smaller. They use the Wonderland on one side of it, but they also do you can put together a really great little shorter backpacking trip using part of the Wonderland in those. So that's in there too. And then at the end, I really wanted to showcase like you saw, the itineraries to help people plan. I just wanted to make it seamless. So they go, okay, I have a week on this trail or 8 days. How is this going to look for me? Do I want to go clockwise, counterclockwise? When I get that, opportunity to make my plan, right, what makes the most sense? And then I have some appendixes, elevation gain and loss, the different camps, the number of individual sites versus group sites, and then a bunch of different trail resources for them too. So that's how the book is laid out. And it's eye candy. It is a place that you will tell your grandchildren about as you put them to bed. It is the kind of place that it's really a magical place. And that sounds kind of, I don't know, ethereal to say that, but it really truly is. There's a bond that, the indigenous peoples felt with this mountain that I think passes over into all of us. When you look at it, even just, sitting at your desk in Seattle, when you look out the window and you see the mountain, but when you're underneath that and you're that close to it, and you're walking through these raging river valleys, and you're up in these high lofty meadows, and you see a deer, you see a bear, you see something for the first time, maybe even like a bear. If you've never seen a bear in the wild and you come into this situation where there's a bear in front of you eating grasses, it's just, there's something that imprints on you that you take back into your daily life where you just don't get that chance.
That's called fear. That's
yeah.
called fear. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
See, the thing is
Yeah.
the thing is what I love about this is that even though this is like not something I have experienced personally, when I get to talk to authors who are, or people in general, when you're passionate about the thing that you're passionate about, it is contagious. Like, I'm about ready to go outside and go hiking right now because of our conversation. I'll send you my hospital bill because that will be following shortly after my hike. But I love this because I love the fact that, you know, you're going back and you're updating it because things have changed. It's not a static. Each time you've hiked the Wonderland Trail, it's been different, right? I mean, you might have been on the same path, but it's not the same path each time.
And I think that's because we change too, right? We're in a different place in life every time we're doing this, or we're in a different, and it is always offering you the same thing, which is like this beautiful token of well, I will say it, wonder. It is really a cool place to have adventure and wonder, and to be submerged in chirping marmots and rushing waterfalls and the things we're in a world of lots of things ringing and emails coming in, and or having to put our fingers in a lot of different places to put out fires in our daily life. And it's like you get out there and there's this like sort of peace that seeps through your skin, and it puts you in a different mindset, and it puts you in a different place spiritually. And I think that's what we're all looking for in this crazy world we live in, is to find that happiness and find that path. And that's what the Wonderland Trail is for me, and for so many others that I've talked to. And I hope that my book is that for people, that they can dream it and then go live it and see it. And I know after talking to a lot of readers that they have used my book as that tool. And there's nothing that makes me happier than getting that email from somebody, because it's been such a soul salve for me. And seeing, which is part of why I wrote this book. I mean, nobody's getting rich as an author. This is an art form. So why spend all this time and energy doing it? It's because watching that joy through other people is so rewarding. Right. So, yeah. So that's why I write, honestly.
Okay. So I haven't asked you this question yet. So here's the question. How's the cell coverage out there? Do we have 5G everywhere?
That's a good question too. They are working on getting better cell coverage in the park, but it's not great. So you will have some probably around Sunrise, a little bit around White River up into Summerland, but a lot of the park, and some down in towards Paradise, but a lot of the park, at least with the Verizon, is one bar. So you could often get a text out, but in some of the deep river valleys, and especially on the west side of the park, you're just not going to get much cell service.
But isn't that part of the beauty of this? As connected and as, dare I say, addicted as we are to our screens, being forced to be disconnected while uncomfortable, isn't it also therapeutic?
Oh, for sure.
I mean,
yeah,
I mean, I want everybody to have cell coverage so they can listen to the podcast all the time. I don't, I
well, they can download it, can't
absolutely.
they?
And they should. No, I just, but the idea that, I'm walking in, you were saying a bear eating grass, and I'm sitting there, and after my stomach has settled back into its place and I'm not terrified and the bear is just ignoring me basically, and I'm respecting it, I really don't want to hear my phone ring. I really don't
Yeah.
want a text to interrupt me. I want to be present in that moment, even though I'm probably, phantom thinking my phone is ringing. I think I think there's a benefit to us when we get out in nature to get away from our connectivity. It's nice to have it as a safety net. If I were to turn my ankle, I could send a text and somebody would, at least be notified that I'm, sitting on a log somewhere on the trail. Um, but I'm enthralled with the idea of disconnecting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't have enough places where we can really truly do that anymore.
Right.
As cell service expands, I agree with you. And I will say along those lines, I do have an app that's yeah, it actually works without cell service. So I'll point that out just in case.
That's why I was leading us there. So what, so you got the Wonderland Trail smartphone app, and I was
Yep.
guessing that it was, not needing, active service to work. What was the inspiration? I mean, okay, so you wrote a book, right? And now you've
Yep.
got some code. Well, those work perfectly well together. I mean, you probably did both. No, where did you get the inspiration to put together an app for this?
Well, there's a really cool group of people. So people that do a lot of hiking and through hiking will know it as formerly known as Gut Hook Guides, and now it's called Far Out. And they're just an amazing app writers. They write the specific formats and they have a lot of different data for all these big trails. I mean, you name a trail that you can paddle, bike ride, hike, there's probably a Far Out app
Okay.
for it. And so I met the founders, the owners, way back when, and ended up visiting with them for quite a while. And they're like, hey, this trail really well. Let's collab and see what we can do together. We have the code, the data behind, or the data minds that know how to process all this stuff. Let's work together. So I did just that. I went out and worked with them and gathered all the data and all the waypoints and all the photos for the app. I did the Northern Loop, the East Side Loop, and the West Side Loop trail. And so all of that is together in this really cool app. So when you're on the Wonderland, if you have it on your phone, a lot of people put their phone in airplane mode, much to your point where they don't want to ding or ping, but also that way they can save their batteries for photos and things. So they'll have it in airplane mode, but it's still working. So you turn it on, it's using GPS, and it's finding exactly where you are on the trail, how far it is to the next stream, for example, where you might want to get water. Or say you're just curious how far it is to your camp, and you look down and you click something on the app, and it'll tell you, oh, we're 3.6 miles from camp. So now that distance before dark, or just it'll show you an actual mountain scale, like a topographical profile, elevation profile, so you can see like, oh, we've got another hill to climb before we drop into this big river valley, or whatever the case may be. So it's pretty cool. It's neat technology. It's good to have and I should also mention it has user comments on there.
Okay.
So if you come to a water source that's dry and no longer running, say in late September or something, and it's been a dry summer, you can get on there and say, dry or whatever. And then, or a lot of people are funny. They'll say like, saw a bear here, or, really great spot for a break, or whatever they find for feedback. And they'll post it on the waypoint. So when you click it, you can read that. And it's pretty cool. So then when you get service, you can upload your comments, the comments from other users come in, and then you can have all of that at your disposal. That's pretty, recent, and see what's going on. And it also is a fun planning tool. You can use it for that too.
Awesome. People that are aware of you know this, but I'm going to guess that a lot of my audience doesn't know this. You are, I mean, there's a number of people that have accomplished this, but it's not all that common. You are what's called a triple crowner. So you've done the Pacific. I got the acronyms in front of me, but So it's the PCT. So that's our audience is kind of familiar with that, at least the Washington State part of it.
Yep.
The CDT, and that's the Continental Divide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the AT is the Appalachian Trail. See, if I think about it, I know these things. Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's just like, the fastest known time acronyms get all scrambled, but they make sense when you say them in their entirety.
What about the PCT and the wash? So when you did the PCT, did you do it all at once?
I did. I have a book on hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, Washington. So I had done the Washington section many times, and I wanted to see what the entire trail was like. So when I went and did my book tours, I could speak intelligently to California, for example, or, how they compare and contrast and what's different and where the hard parts are. So, yeah.
Which way did you go, from Canada down, or did you go from Mexico up?
I went northbound. So I went from Mexico to Canada.
And what was this is next to impossible question, but what was your single biggest aha from doing that?
Oh man, it's really tough. There's a lot of people that I'm married. So that was one of the things, is leaving, my husband and my dog and going out for 5 months with very little contact.
5 months.
And
wow.
The PCT is a very social trail, though. And one of the really cool things is you hear a lot of people that haven't done it say, oh, I want to do it solo. I'm going to do it solo. Right. But you almost always find what's called a tramily, which is a trail family. And it's almost like the trail brings you together with people that are doing it, and you sort of trauma bond over all different kinds of experiences. You end up with lifetime friendships that the world has given you that you never would have expected. People from other countries, and it's just really cool. So being able to do it socially is really, really fun, and meeting a whole bunch of different people and learning from them and hiking with them and going through experiences with them is crazy. It's like taking a vacation with a whole bunch of strangers and you're all doing a very difficult vacation.
Do you have any intention of doing that one again?
I would love to do the PCT again, but honestly, I think I'm at a point in my life where I like a little bit shorter trips. I've done, the PCT, the CDT, the AT, the West Coast Trail, which is a shorter one up on Vancouver Island, which was amazing. Of course, the Wonderland 93, the Colorado Trail, which is, almost 500 miles, the Arizona Trail, which is over 800 miles. So when you do all these different trails, you kind of go, it's nice being out there, and I love being out there and marinating in that, but I do miss I miss friends and family, and I kind of miss all the comforts of home. And I've done it so much now that I'm kind of shifting gears a little bit, and I still love the idea of long trails, but there's a lot to see in a very short time on this earth, and I kind of want to see it all. Okay. So I might be interested in doing different versions of that, So
is there a hike you haven't,
maybe doing different loops?
Is there a hike that you haven't experienced that you want to?
There are a lot of hikes I haven't experienced that I want to. One being the Pacific Northwest Trail. I've done quite a few sections of that, but I've never done it in its entirety. Okay. That one's kind of unique because it's still in its infancy. They're working with the Forest Service. There's a lot of talk and grants about that one becoming what the Pacific Crest Trail is now. But right now it connects with a lot of forest roads. It's in a lot of really remote areas. There's grizzly bears and mountain lions, and it's very rugged. It's kind of what the old school PCT was before it became the well-used pathway it is now. So I really am interested in hopping on that one and getting that one, seeing it now and then seeing it when it sort of morphs and watching it grow. So the sections I've done are just absolutely gorgeous, and I would love to do the whole thing. Okay. But, again, that takes you away from home for a while and kind of puts you in a different place. So you have to have the right timing in your life to be able to accomplish those in one.
Does your husband like to hike?
He does, but he is not really into it like I am. He is more into the adrenaline sports. So if you can't break a bone, he's not in. If you can hurt yourself, He's
He's there.
there.
Okay.
He's there. So hiking is a little probably a little bit too much mind noise for him.
Got it. All right. As we wrap this up, I always ask my guests, and so I've already asked you these questions, so I'm going to need new answers from you.
Okay.
Where's a great place for coffee now in North Bend? What's new?
Well, the coffee scene hasn't changed that much, but I do like Huckstadter, which is really cool. Huckstadter Coffee, it's kind of a local shop. They put a new, I don't remember the year they put it in, but they put a new building in, and it's a beautiful building, and they have beautiful coffee shop, and the employees there are lovely. It's handcrafted coffee, and they have energy drinks and snacks and all that good stuff. But it is delicious coffee.
So, what are you drinking there? What's your
yeah.
go-to right now?
Right now, I'm into the seasonals.
Please,
I'm your
please
typical.
don't say it. Don't say it.
I know you're.
No.
I won't. I won't even say it. How about I just say it has some cinnamon and nutmeg? Does that help a little? Oh, I totally ruined it, didn't I?
That's okay.
Yeah, I do tend to like a little. I like strong black coffee too. I will do an Americano, with the best of them. But when I get the opportunity to get a little cinnamon or nutmeg or something spice in there, I like that too.
What do you drink at home? What's the go-to coffee at home?
Double cappuccino, extra foam.
Okay. All right. How about lunch in North Bend area? Anything new and exciting in North Bend for lunch?
For lunch in North Bend, there's always good stuff. I still am a huge fan of Rio Bravo. It's a cool little Hispanic, like tacos. They have quesadillas. But it's run by quality humans, which also makes me really happy to support businesses like that. They're out there supporting the community and doing good things, and that always makes the food taste better.
I didn't scan our previous conversation, so I can't remember. Did I ask you the either or question?
I think you did.
So is any change I can't remember if you were cake or pie.
I'm cake.
You're cake. Okay.
Yeah. It hasn't changed. If I have to do pie, which I don't mind from time to time, it's got to be like not a fruit pie, but a cream-based pie, like chocolate silk or banana cream or coconut cream or pumpkin or one of those that's kind of more on the side of like custardy versus a fruit pie. Because fruit to me should be in yogurt at breakfast, not in dessert.
All right. I mean, there's no wrong answers here. I can tease you, but there's no wrong answers here. Well, actually, that's not true.
It's just how the palate is wired, right? It's what we like, what we like.
I will say there is one wrong answer for me because it's pumpkin. No,
you don't like pumpkin at all?
No. My wife makes a pumpkin chili that I actually have to admit I like. But,
whoa!
But yeah.
Wait, like actual chili, stovetop chili?
Stovetop chili, pumpkin. Cut up pumpkin pieces, and it's in the chili. Yeah, it's actually.
Is there a recipe for this that you can share? Because that sounds amazing.
I'm sure. EDA, if you're listening to this, don't take this the wrong way. I'm sure she didn't create it on her own. I know she got a recipe from somewhere. I will ask her, and I will send it to you.
I would love that. I would love that. You might get some requests from your listeners too. That sounds pretty cool. It sounds really neat and seasonal right now.
Yeah, it's that is the one way that I have found pumpkin to be palatable. I did a story from my youth. My grandmother every Thanksgiving. So think about this. Thanksgiving happens once a year, but it does repeat, right? And so as a 10, 11-year-old, I remember my grandmother asking me, "Do you want some pumpkin pie with Thanksgiving?" No, thank you. I don't like pumpkin. Okay. Next year, do you want some pumpkin pie? I don't like pumpkin. Since when? And it was every year it became the since when. She just couldn't, she blanked that out. It was, I think I was just a disappointment to her. But I just never is not one that works for me. So.
You just don't like the flavor or texture, both?
Flavor, texture's okay, it's okay, but it's the flavor. It's like I
Hmm.
genuinely, I tried it, and anybody that drinks pumpkin spice coffee beverages, it doesn't work. And if it works for you,
Interesting.
good. For me, no way,
Not so
no
much.
way.
Wow.
Mm-mm. And I dread.
Are you picky in general?
No, I'm not. No, I'm
Interesting.
not. I mean,
Okay.
I'm pretty. Uh, I mean, I'm not a big fan of like really super spicy stuff, things like that. But I'm not like, there are certain things I don't like, but I'll try things. I mean, I'll always, if you said, Scott, come over, we'll have, we'll have dinner, and it'll be beets and pumpkin. Scott's probably going to be busy that day, but yeah,
Beets are another one
yeah,
for you, huh?
beets taste like dirt, and I can,
So I'm kind of, yeah.
but at the same time, I've had beets when I wasn't necessarily aware of, like pickled beets. I like pickled beets, so go figure.
How about yams?
Pass, pass. I'm
Carrots? Root
carrots,
vegetables
carrots,
in general? Are
carrots are
we
good.
seeing a theme here?
Squash, no, no,
Okay.
not a big squash fan necessarily. Yeah, yeah, the fall root stuff.
The fall harvest is not in your
No, not
blood.
for me. Not so much. So
All right. Okay, fair enough. We all have our
exactly.
stuff.
So I'm going to let you have the final word. First off, actually, two things. Number one, what did we miss that you want to make sure we talk about? And two, where can people find out more about you, about your books, the app, and all of that?
Sure, I would love to connect with people. I think for me, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, that brings me a ton of joy. I love hearing if you've used my book, if you found it helpful. I'd love to see your pictures. I've just met so many cool people that way. So you can reach me at my first name, last name.com. And on there are links to email and all my socials and all
Okay.
that. And it's TamiAsars.com. And that will probably be
Yep.
on your
Yep. It will
page, I
be.
imagine,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Yeah. And so that's probably the biggest thing, where to find me. And then, anytime you have, something, your joy to share of any of my books, I'd love to hear about it. But especially the Wonderland Trail. The Wonderland Trail was my first child, so to speak. I look at all these books as babies because each one is a labor to go through of intensity. And then once it's born, you're so proud of it and so happy to have it. And it becomes your child, and you forget about all the struggles and the challenges of writing it. And so as my first baby and my first love, this Hiking the Wonderland Trail book is very near and dear to me. And I feel like the people I've met on the trail and my readers have that same love and connection with this trail. And so, yeah, they're good people, and I'd love to hear
So
from
I
them.
just realized something. The second edition's coming out 12 years after the first one was published, right? So
Yeah.
you're getting
Yeah.
rid of the teenage years. You're resetting the clock.
Yeah,
Just like,
that's it. I, maybe I could say it's my grandchild.
oh, awesome. All right.
I
Well,
could,
Tami,
yeah,
thanks for because we had some technical challenge to get this thing started. So thank you for being patient with me there. But thank you for taking some time
sure.
and sitting down again. And I have one last question.
Okay.
What do you have a book on the horizon you're thinking about?
I do. I have, so Alan Bauer and Dan Nelson were kind enough to suggest a predecessor for their Day Hiking Snoqualmie region
Mm-hmm.
book. It is going into another edition. And they suggested that I would be the right fit for that, especially since I live in North Bend and it's right in my backyard, and these trails are very close to me. And so I am in the process. It's really super fun. I'm also writing a book on trail culture, which is super fun too. And that one has a lot of just really fun, goofy terms that people use on trails as through hikers. That is just it's a coffee table book. It's a giggle book. It's a fun book, but it's also an educational book if you're kind of coming into the brand new world of through hiking and learning about that. So it'll get you being one of the cool kids really fast.
So when
Very
do you
ready.
think that might be published? Do you have an ETA on that one?
It probably will. It will be a couple
Okay.
years yet. There's quite a bit of work to be done on it. So call me. We're hoping to get into next year or possibly at the beginning of 2026.
Okay.
So again, these books are massively data intense, and there's a lot of, you have to go back over stuff and make sure everything's correct. And you work so hard at it. And so putting these to market it's a labor of love by both Mountaineers Books, who is a fantastic publisher, and myself, who, does all the legwork and the writing and all the little quirky things that are included, including my bad dad jokes from time to time.
Well, I hope you'll come back on when you've got a new book and we can talk about it.
I'd love to. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for being a repeat guest. Maybe I don't know. Did you ever see the Saturday Night Live where they have the skit for the Five Timers Club? Have you ever?
No.
It's a running get.
Awesome.
So there's some of the famous people that have been on Saturday, like Steve Martin, Tom Hanks,
Yeah.
And so there's a private club where they always, whenever a new host is entered the club, it's like they wear bathrobes that say 5 on them and all that. So maybe one of these days we'll do something like that for repeat guests.
Cool.
Yeah, something quirky and
yeah,
a little bit off. So anyway, but thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Hope you enjoyed the show. You can reach me on Twitter at ExploreWaState. I'd love to hear your comments. You can also visit our website at explorewashingtonstate.com. If you know anyone who would like the show, it'd be amazing if you'd share the show with them. This is the biggest way that we grow this show. Good old word of mouth. I'm glad you were here with me today, and I hope to have you listening to the next episode. See you then.